Hi, it's Penny here, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in the month of July. So I read 9 things in July, 3 physical books, 3 ebooks, and 3 audiobooks. And I was thinking that wasn't that much, like less than I normally read, even though it's more than I read in June. And I'm also just right now realizing that it's more books than I normally plan to read in a month. So actually, maybe it's fine and I'm just being unrealistic, expecting myself to read more. I don't know. But I am going to wrap this up book battle style like I normally do, where I pair up all the books and I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. And since I had 3 groups of 3, we're going to do it as 3 battles of 3. So firstly, we'll do the physical books. So we have Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler up against The Fallen by Ada Hoffman, up against The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. And even though I read these physically, 2 of them I got from the library and I had to return them, so I'll just put pictures here. So we'll start with Parable of the Sower. This is a book that was written in the 90s, but it's set in the early 2020s. So I think it started about 2023 and goes through to about 2027, which is part of why I wanted to read it at the moment. And the amazing thing about this book is that even though it was written in the 90s, it does a really great job of depicting the current dystopia that we live in. It's a little bit more dystopian than our world, but is it? A little bit, but it seems like a very close reality. But maybe it's also true that humanity has been teetering on that kind of reality for a while. So in this book, we're following this teenage girl, and she lives in kind of this community where they have walls around them to protect them. And she has a lot of thoughts about religion. And throughout this book, she's kind of inventing her own religion that she calls Earthseed. As well, she has this thing called hyper-empathy, which means that anytime she sees someone in pain, she feels that pain herself. But for the first half of this book, it's really much more slice of life than I was expecting. We kind of just have this young teenage girl living in this community, dealing with the violence and the poverty of the world, but also just the community dramas and family life, dystopian style community dramas, but it's really slice of life. And the whole thing actually is written as her journal, and it feels like a teenage girl's journal. So I will admit, in some bits, I found the first half especially kind of dragged a bit, even though it was quite interesting at the same time, philosophically interesting, but in terms of plot, not so much. Then the second half really takes a turn. They're kind of traveling through this dystopian a bit more, and to me it felt a lot more like one of those zombie TV shows or movies. Not that there's zombies, but a lot of the people around them are acting violent in a similar way, and it's very dangerous and everyone out for themselves in a similar way to those kind of shows. And actually, even that second half though, I would still say in some ways felt very slice of life. I think maybe it's the journal entries. And then any time that I would feel like the plot would really get going, part of me would stop and think, is this how you would write a journal entry? So it was a little bit hard matching the format of the book with the actual content sometimes. But anyway, even though sometimes I found this a little bit tedious and not my favorite reading experience, I still think what this book has to say and what this book is representing about our current dystopian reality is worth the read. Then we have The Fallen by Ada Hoffman. So this is the second book in a trilogy, and I'm just thinking now, it's kind of also a dystopian, but another step away from our reality. So this is set in a world where we have these AI gods, and when humans die, these AI gods will absorb their souls. So the AI gods are kind of encouraging humans to do great things so that they can absorb that greatness, but also they don't want humans to get out of control. So in the first book, there was a science experiment that kind of went wrong, and that led the gods to send in the angels. And the angels are like humans that have these technological enhancements. The first book really got into the religion of it and the weirdness of it because the science experiment has kind of messed with reality a little bit. The second book though was more kind of about the activism of this group. So we have this group of people who have been really traumatized by the events of the first book and earlier, and now they all kind of have different mental issues that they're dealing with, but as well they're dealing with the realities of the world or the unrealities of the world, and they're working together kind of with these resistance groups against the angels and the gods. And a lot of this book is really just that group trying to decide what to do and then finally doing it, but more of it is about them trying to decide what to do rather than them actually doing it. So in some ways this was quite a slow book and not that much happened. I liked a lot of the issues that the different characters were dealing with, and I liked the representation of their different mental issues, but how they work to overcome it to help the world in this time when things are a bit crazy. So maybe not what I was expecting for the sequel of the series, but I still really enjoyed it. And then we have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So this has been all over the place lately. Lots of people are reading it because of course lots of people like his First Law series, and I also love that series. So I was very excited to pick this up, and honestly, I loved it. Did it deliver everything I was hoping for? No, but it was still just a lot of fun. And I think I was able to let go of what I wanted the book to be and just enjoy it for what it was. I can definitely see that it won't work for everyone, and I do have my complaints, but it's just a really good time. So we're following this group, the Devils, as they attempt to get this long-lost princess, Alexia, to Troy where she can take over the throne. And the Devils are this group of unusual individuals that the church uses when they need people with unusual abilities. Part of me wants to tell you about all the characters because I did really love the characters, but I think part of the joy of this book is just reading it and getting to know all these characters as you go along. And I especially loved the banter of the different characters. Now, I will admit, the plot is a little bit nothingness. They're just kind of traveling and overcoming different obstacles along the way. There's a lot of fight scenes, and I don't particularly like fight scenes, and the fight scenes were often quite drawn out, which was frustrating, but woven in there were some really cool moments and some funny jokes. I will admit, sometimes some of the jokes kind of go a little bit overboard. Like, I guess Joe is really in there enjoying his jokes, and sometimes maybe he's a little bit too self-indulgent with them. Maybe he takes them a little bit too far. I think if you're not finding the jokes funny, that's going to be especially frustrating because he's really emphasizing some of these jokes, and it can at times be a little bit repetitive. But even though I did feel that at times, I still overall was having a good time. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, hurry up, let's move on. But always we would come back to something that was really cool or really fun. And I say fun, it is still really dark and quite crass humor at times. So if you don't like that, you're not going to like this because it really gets into it. But honestly, I had a lot of fun with it. So if I'm putting these three up against each other, we'll take away Parable of the Sower, because even though I actually think that's the one that most people should read. Am I taking it away then? I think most people should read Parable of the Sower, but my reading journey with it was the least enjoyable. So I'm going to take that away. And then it's hard to make the decision between the other two because for both of them, there were elements that I really loved and elements that I wish it had done a bit better. But overall, I think the characters in The Devils were much more memorable, and I enjoyed their interactions so much more. I think I'm going to pick The Devil as the winner of this battle. Okay, then for the ebook battle, we have Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson, up against Wolf's Brother by Megan Lindholm, up against The Honey Month by Amal Mohtar. So firstly, Isles of the Emberdark. I paid the money to get this fancy book, and it is really fancy. I especially like that the second half of the book, not the first half, but the second half has black pages, and there is also some really beautiful art throughout this book. The end pages are beautiful. So I'm not sad about owning this pretty book. What I am sad about is that I didn't really love the story, and I probably shouldn't be surprised because a lot of Sanderson's later books have not been ones that I've been loving. I love some of his earlier stuff. I love Elantris and Mistborn and the earliest on my archive books. Only the earlier Mistborn ones as well. Mistborn Era 1 I love. I love a lot of that, but the later books, there's just something about them that doesn't feel to me like it has the same level of depth, and the plot doesn't feel quite as clever either. In this book in particular, so we are back in the world of the novella Six of the Dusk, and Six of the Dusk is the main character in this book. He is on this planet where they have these bird companions that give them different magical abilities. This is a very shiny book. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Anyway, they have these bird companions that give them different abilities, but this is in kind of a future Cosmere where the Cosmere, if you don't know, is Brandon Sanderson's kind of universe that all his worlds are in, and the idea is that this whole kind of interconnected series is going to move forward in time and in technology. So we're kind of moving in now to this era where there's going to be like space travel and these different worlds are able to interact. And so Dusk's people have been approached by some other people from other worlds that we've met previously. But it's a little bit weird because these other worlds, we haven't gotten their stories up to the point where they've got this kind of space travel ability. So what we're seeing of them in this story is in the future of the stories that we actually know. And it feels like we're missing a bit there. So then when Dusk meets up with some of these people, getting all sorts of different stuff, different terminology and different concepts from other Cosmere novels all thrown in together. And I don't know, I just don't really like it. It makes it feel very lacking in cohesion. Like I don't feel like the way that these stories are coming together is being done in a way that's satisfying to me at all. I didn't feel like the characters in here mostly felt like they had much depth. And a lot of their plans were like the worst plans ever. Why would you even think that that was a good idea? There were moments in this that were really cool. There are some ideas in this that are really cool. But overall, I wish the story had done some different things with those ideas. I feel like the later Cosmere is like there's so much going on. It kind of loses focus and means that we don't get any depth in any particular area. And that's what's disappointing me. I could probably rant about this for ages. The summary is, I have a beautiful book, but I'm disappointed about the story. Look at the back though. It is beautiful. Okay, then Wolf's Brother by Megan Lindholm. I'm wondering now, did I say Robin Hobb when I introduced this battle? Probably, because Megan Lindholm is a pen name for Robin Hobb. In fact, she was writing under Megan Lindholm first and then started writing as Robin Hobb, but the style of writing is very similar. I'm actually not sure why she changed to write under a different name. But if you want a couple of short Robin Hobb books, because most of her series are quite long, these are some short ones that I think give you a lot of similar feelings. So Wolf's Brother is the sequel to The Reindeer People, and it's just a duology. And honestly, I think it could have been one book and just wrapped it all up at once, but never mind. So we're following this woman and her son. The son is a little bit different in his behavior, maybe like autism coded, and that has meant they've kind of really struggled to find a group of people where they fit in. Just a lot of people aren't very accepting of them. So at the beginning of the first book, they do travel and they meet up with these reindeer people, so these people that herd reindeer. And there's a man in that tribe that is actually very accepting of this young boy. And I just really liked the relationships that got formed throughout this. There's a lot of like interpersonal drama within this tribe. I guess you could frame it also as political drama. And there's also a magical element to things. I really like the way it's done where you can kind of decide whether to interpret it as actual magic or whether it's just something these people are imagining. And I think the story still has meaning either way. As you would expect from a Robin Hobb book series, the end of this one had some awful moments, like probably a lot of trigger warnings actually in this duology. So worth looking that up if you're concerned. But even though there were some really traumatic moments, I also think the ending was very satisfying and I just really had a great time with these books. Okay, then lastly we have The Honey Month by Amal El-Mohtar. So Amal El-Mohtar wrote This Is How You Lose the Time War with Max Gladstone, and also The River Has Roots recently that a lot of people have been raving about. The Honey Month is a weird little project she did that I actually started reading in February, because the project was that she was given this little honey sampler where there was a little sample of honey for every day in February. And so then for every day in February, she would try the little sample of honey and then write a little description of it, and also write some kind of like little short story or piece of poetry based on that sample of honey. So it's an interesting concept, and some of the stories are so lovely. Some of the writing and some of the lines are amazing. I actually think maybe I would love to make more of a collation of some of them. Is that the word? Because I love some moments of this, but the reason why I started reading this in February and then it's taken me until now to read it is just I had the idea that I would just read one little short story every day, and it only takes a minute or two, but I just found reading that much of it a little bit too overwhelming. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like I feel like I would get the most out of this kind of book if I just read like one a month and then really sat with it and thought about it for like a long extended period of time. But if I'm just kind of consuming it, then I almost don't feel like I'm getting it. Maybe this is just how I feel about poetry as a whole. And maybe that's why I don't read much poetry, even though I kind of like poetry. But again, if I feel like I'm just consuming it and then doing nothing with it, I feel like it loses the meaning. Maybe I just don't feel like that about books because you spend so much time with a book when you're reading it. So it's like I want to spend that much time with a poem if I'm reading it as well. Maybe this is my problem with short stories as well. Anyway, the summary is if you want some really cool bee and honey vibes and you really like short stories that maybe don't have much of a story, they're more just about the vibes. Like if you like that, maybe you should check out this anthology. But for me, if I am putting these three books up against each other, firstly, I would take away the honey month. And so then we're just left with these two. And I think I already made it clear that this one was disappointing to me. So that means Wolf's Brother is the winner of this battle. Then lastly, we have the audiobook battle. So we have Call Me Evie by J.P. Pomare up against If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, up against They Never Learn by Layne Fargo. So the funny thing is, even though I read all of these by audiobooks, I also have the physical books from the library for all of them. But the books I read physically, I don't have from the library. Anyway, firstly, we have Call Me Evie. I mainly picked this up because I realized I'd read every other book by J.P. Pomare, so I thought I may as well complete the set, even though this is his first book and I didn't expect it to be as good, and I'm glad I went in with that expectation, or otherwise I think I would have been very disappointed. So we're following two timelines. One is this young teenage girl having drama with her friends, in love with this guy, but also having some drama there, like just very teenage life. And then something has gone wrong. We don't know what. So in the future, she's with this guy. So she's from Melbourne, but they're now in remote New Zealand, kind of in hiding. And you don't know, like, is this guy really trying to help her or not? Because she doesn't even really remember properly whatever happened that led them to go into hiding. So I personally don't really like mystery thrillers that rely on an unreliable narrator. So that was a downside for this for me. But also I feel like the pacing was off. In J.P. Pomare's later books, I think he's really great at kind of like giving you lots of clues and getting you invested and then building the intensity and kind of having all the reveals come together in a way that's really exciting. And this just didn't pull that off at all. Although I could see some of maybe the beginnings of him being great at doing that. Even though this wasn't great, I could see some of the things he does in there, just not done as well as he does them in later books. As well, there's kind of like mental illness representation in here, which is pretty terrible as well. So like a lot not to like about this book. I definitely would not recommend starting with this one in terms of J.P. Pomare. I still think I will do a video where I go through all his books now that I've read all of them. I'm wondering if he's going to release something else soon and ruin that. I guess we'll see. Anyway, not the best. Then we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. So this one I've had on my want to read list for a long time as some kind of like dark academia story. Basically, we are following these drama students, and you know right from the beginning that one of them has been put in jail for something, but there's also this police officer that thinks he was probably actually innocent, and then he's telling the police officer his story about what actually happened. So the murder in the story doesn't happen till halfway through. Up until then, it's pretty much just drama students having drama, living their lives, and I didn't mind it. The characters were fine, but it was kind of boring. And I was kind of confused why people love this so much. And even then, when the murder happened, I straight away guessed who it was, so it wasn't very exciting figuring that out. I think if you like the characters in this, you might really like this. But I was just mostly bored. Like, it was fine. I think it was well written, but maybe I should have read it when I was first interested in reading it. Maybe I would have liked it better then, although I actually think maybe I would have liked it 10 years before that even, which probably it wasn't published at that point. First published 2017. Yeah, nah, I think the summary is I'm probably too old for that book. I probably would have loved it like 15 to 20 years earlier than it was ever published. But it was fine. It was fine. Then I read They Never Learn by Layne Fargo. So this is a story about this woman who will pick the worst man at her university or in her area, and then she'll kill him. And we're also getting this other student at the university, her perspective. And it was interesting how those two perspectives came together. And I definitely felt through all of this quite invested and quite interested in what was happening. So I think it's very well written. But I have to admit that I had some problems with, I guess, the morality of this, and I don't think that's really what you're meant to be thinking about when you're reading this, but I wish it had kind of addressed that with a little bit more nuance than it did. But it's just a thriller. People are dying. You're not meant to question the morality too much, but also you're probably not meant to question the feasibility as much as I was. I just don't really believe that she would have gotten away with all these murders, and that was kind of always distracting me a bit from this book as well. And I guess since I just criticized the other two books for the same thing, the perspective of the younger university student was, again, just kind of like young people drama. And if I had been a young person still kind of in that world, having that kind of drama, maybe I would enjoy reading it more. I'm just too old for it. So those parts weren't my favorite. So if I'm putting these three books up against each other, firstly we'll take away Call Me Evie, because this was the worst written. Then I guess between these two, like, this one was just definitely way more boring. So we'll get rid of that and we'll pick the morally questionable one. Because I think if you could overlook the like moral questionability of this, you could just enjoy these men, like this woman getting revenge on these men. I think you could enjoy it. I couldn't quite let myself enjoy it. But it's still the winner of the battle. So that means to decide the best book of the month, we're going to have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie up against Wolf's Brother by Megan Lindholm, up against They Never Learn by Layne Fargo. Okay, so firstly we're going to take away They Never Learn because of a lot of reasons, but also I'm a fantasy sci-fi girl at heart, so those are the books we're going to have in the final. These two books are very different. The Devils is like much more brutal and fun. Is that true? This one's pretty brutal too in some ways. Anyway, let's not muck around. The Devils is not going to win the battle. We're going to have Wolf's Brother as the best book of the month because this was such an emotional journey, but also I loved the world and the characters. It's mostly the emotions. Like, I just love Robin Hobb's writing, and I was really glad to have a little bit more of it. So, best book of the month. If you love Robin Hobb and you haven't read this duology, I think it's worth picking up. A little bit less epic in scale than her other books, obviously, because there's less space for epicness. It's a much more like contained kind of family story. So let me know if you've read any of these books, because I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Also, let me know what the best book was that you read in the month of July. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.